You've been watching the Middle East this week. We all have. And at some point, I stopped watching these explosions and started asking a question, a different one. Who is ordering these attacks on Iran's side? Look, President Trump is directing American forces, Prime Minister Netanyahu is directing Israeli forces. That part is pretty clear. But who is telling Iranian forces to fire at Saudi Arabia, at Dubai, at American bases across the Gulf? Who is making those decisions? Because think about it, the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is dead. Iran's civilian president Masoud Pezeshkian is nowhere to be seen, and honestly, he was a weak figurehead even before any of this started. The top military commanders have been systematically eliminated. There is no functioning chain of command visible to the outside world. So who is actually running Iran right now? I know the answer obviously, but I still went looking for more in this context. And what I found is more intriguing and disturbing than anything you've seen on news this week. Because when you dig into who is actually making decisions inside Iran right now, you don't find a government in crisis, you don't find a military scrambling to regroup. You find a, I won't hesitate to say this, you find a mafia, and I'm not exaggerating at all, though it sounds weird. And the mafia's name is IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. To understand what you're actually looking at, you need to understand what the IRGC was originally built to do. Iran has two separate military structures. There is a regular army, the Artish, which defends borders, fights external enemies, and answers to the defense ministry. That is a standard military like any other country. There is a regular police force as well. It's called Faraja. And then there is something else called Sepah. In other words, IRGC. Created in 1979 with one very specific instruction, not to defend Iran, but to defend the revolution and to protect the regime at any cost. That is the only purpose. See, defending a country has a clear purpose and a clear boundary, but defending an ideology has neither. An organization built to protect an idea with no geographic limit and no check on its behavior will always find ways to grow. And I'll tell you something genuinely alarming about how it grew. The IRGC's transformation did not happen through a coup or an overnight seizure of power. It happened through something far more patient. It happened through business contracts, shady deals, black markets, Ponzi schemes. Yes, I'm talking about IRGC. I'll give you some background information, and it is very, very interesting. That was 1988. The Iran-Iraq war ends after 8 years and close to 1 million people died during that war, and the country was in ruins with no money to rebuild. So the Iranian regime hands the IRGC a contract. The contract was simple. Go build things across the country and keep the profits. That single decision built an empire, the Mafia that I call it. Within a decade, the IRGC's construction arm was operating through a network of over 800 front companies covering roads, airports, dams, metro systems, oil pipelines, all of it through contracts awarded directly with no competitive bidding, no transparency, and no outside oversight. You're not answerable to anyone, no accountability. But then something changed. The Western sanctions hit in the 2000s, foreign companies left, and you would expect the IRGC to feel the pressure. But it didn't. It in fact expanded. In 2009, Iran held what is called its biggest privatization in history, selling 51% of the national telecom company in the largest single transaction in the history of Tehran Stock Exchange, $7.8 billion. And the buyer was an IRGC-affiliated consortium. Iran's entire phone network handed to the military in a deal officially called privatization. By 2013, the Clinton-Dale Institute estimated that IRGC-linked foundations controlled more than half of Iran's entire GDP. Half the economy of a country of 90 million people owned by an organization that answers to no one. And the IRGC did not even stop there. It built something so sprawling, so deeply embedded in Iran's economy that Foreign Affairs magazine called it a Ponzi scheme, a system designed to keep a small group permanently rich at the expense of everyone else. Every time Western sanctions tightened, the IRGC's black market operations grew, because when legitimate trade is legally blocked, smuggling becomes the only supply chain, and the IRGC controls every port, every border crossing, every checkpoint in the country. Sanctions were designed to weaken the regime. What they actually did was hand the IRGC a monopoly on Iran's survival. The people keeping Iranians poor were getting richer every time those same Iranians were squeezed harder. Now think about that for a second. If your business model runs on sanctions, on isolation, on being permanently locked out of the global economy, what do you actually want from the nuclear program? Not what you say you want, what you actually want. Every time Iran came close to a deal with the West, something escalated. Every time sanctions were about to ease, a provocation followed. For 25 years, the pattern repeated, and every time the IRGC came out with more economic control, not less. The nuclear program, the proxy wars, the missile tests, you've been reading those as foreign policy decisions made by a government? What if I say they were business decisions made by a cartel called IRGC? Keep Iran permanently outside the global economy, keep legitimate competition permanently locked out, keep the black market permanently the only market, and keep the people who run the black market permanently indispensable. That's not ideology. That is a shady business strategy, and it has run without interruption for 4 decades. Which brings us to this week, and what the IRGC actually did when the supreme leader died. See, Iran's constitution has one mechanism for replacing a supreme leader. The assembly of experts, 88 senior clerics, must formally come together and select a new one. That is the legal process the entire Iranian regime is built on. The IRGC did not even use it this time. Apparently, from the reports coming out of Iran right now, this selection process is being driven by direct IRGC pressure outside the constitutional procedure in the middle of this war. No formal assembly, no deliberation, and at the time of recording this video, there is no official confirmation from Iranian state resources, but the reports coming out consistently point in one direction. The name being reported as the IRGC's chosen successor is Mojtaba Khamenei, the dead Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's son. Now, I want to be precise because this is not yet officially confirmed when recording this video, and it might change by the time I upload this video. Mojtaba has never held a government position, never been elected to anything, never given a public speech as a political figure. In fact, he was sanctioned by the US Treasury in 2019 for operating as a shadow power inside the Supreme Leader's office. And Bloomberg documented in January 2026 that he controls an offshore financial network spanning London real estate, Dubai holdings, and layered corporate structures worth hundreds of millions of dollars. If these reports are accurate, it is absolutely clear that the IRGC did not choose him for his religious standing. They chose him because he already knew where all the money was. If I have to be really frank with you, they chose a puppet with a religious title. So I hope you realized who is actually taking decisions in launching all the missiles across the Middle Eastern region right now in Iran. And while all of this is happening, there is one party watching very carefully, sitting thousands of miles away, with more invested in this region than almost any other country on planet Earth: China. For years, China has been buying roughly 80% of all Iranian oil exports, not through official channels, but through a ghost fleet market of tankers that disable their tracking systems, relabel the cargo offshore, and deliver it to small independent refineries in Shandong province. China didn't do this out of solidarity, it did it because discounted Iranian crude saved Beijing billions every year. It was a transaction, a very large and very quiet transaction, and that transaction kept the IRGC financially alive through every round of Western sanctions. Now here's the problem. China has spent the last decade pouring over $100 billion into Gulf infrastructure, ports, railways, refineries, and industrial zones across Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Iraq. These are the same countries the IRGC is now firing missiles at. And the IRGC has formally declared the Strait of Hormuz closed, threatening to set ablaze any ship that tries to cross. The strait through which nearly 20% of the world's oil passes, including China's own supply from those same Gulf states. China funded one side of this war, and that side is now threatening everything China built on the other side. That's the position Beijing is in right now. We'll be getting into exactly what that means in the coming episodes, because what Beijing does next changes everything about how this ends. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.